Okay. Hello, everyone. This is the cert-manager public issue discussion meeting, and it's Wednesday, the 12th of January. I think everyone here has been here before, so we'll skip the introductions and go straight onto the first item, which is so someone flagged, well, a few people have flagged issues since the migration of the Ingress object that we use from cert-manager 1.5. So in cert-manager 1.5, we were aiming to support Kubernetes 1.22, which removed the v1 beta 1 ingress from the Kubernetes API. Let's see, there was plenty of notice for people to translate, to move all of their objects to v1, because Kubernetes has been talking about it for a very long time, and v1 was added in 1.19. But it's the document and cap that was used to deprecate the API objects looks like it's turned out to be slightly ambiguous. So when we implemented the change to Ingress, the main change is that the Ingress class that used to be kind of a well-known annotation, kubernetes.io/ingress.class, got promoted to a fully fledged field in Ingress v1, but the usage of the annotation and the field aren't quite the same. The field expects to point to a Ingress class API object, and the annotation was just a free text. And this has caused a few issues, especially with Azure, as Azure Ingress class had a /in, which is or a dot. I can't remember, but it was an invalid character for the field. And also, because the deprecation wording was kind of ambiguous, what we chose to do was copy the annotation to the Ingress class field, move it rather. We would remove the annotation, and this broke people that didn't have an Ingress class specified as an object, because it's an object reference rather than the free text field. However, some Ingress controllers just worked with it fine, and some didn't. So it's all a bit of a thorny problem, because we want to be compatible with everything, but lots of Ingress controllers have implemented this differently. So this came to light through a report that Istio no longer could solve challenges, Istio Ingress Gateway. And yeah, so we've done a lot of research on this, so thanks to Mail and to James Manley, who's not here, and Evo for doing a lot of research. And the proposal is that we stop using the new field at all and just set the annotation, because in the v1's documentation and cap, there's a few slightly ambiguous sentences, but there is a sentence that says if the annotation is present, it must be considered over the field, and you should ignore the field, because this is the kind of migration path for people that just upgraded without upgrading their Ingress controller. So the suggestion for us is that we just set the annotation and don't set the field at all. And that issue is the wording, basically. So we reached out to a lot of people, like SIG API and SIG Network, and the Ingress Nginx maintainers we sent them all a little message asking what their plan is for handling the annotation versus field. But from our side, we think that we'll break the least people, or by just forgetting about that field exists and using the annotation. So I guess, does anyone have anything to say about that I missed?
So do we qualify this as a regression or not?
I mean, from my pride, because I wrote the Ingress converter.
that was really good. So
my pride is no, it wasn't a regression, but it is a regression because it broke people, but because the wording of the KEP was not very clear, and I think the people who added the change to Ingress Nginx don't have English as their first language. But I mean, it wasn't clear to us, so there's no way it would be clear to them.
I totally agree. There is no way to have a clear interpretation of the current documentation. So this is not on us.
I guess the actual discussion is, okay, if we change this to remain the most compatible, what release should it go in? How much testing should we do with as many Ingress controllers as we can? I guess those are the two unanswered questions. Like, which release should it go in? Should we backport it? And how do we test it?
Personally, I would like to see this backported to both 1.5 and 1.6. I know it's a lot of work, but
it's not a lot of work. Just testing it on lots of different Ingress controllers is it's just manual work. Okay, I've forgotten what our revised release timeline is. Someone remind me when our 1.7 release is.
26th January.
Okay, so not much time, but no arguments for putting it in 1.5, 1.6, and 1.7.
1.6 I can see the argument for. 1.5 seems like a bit of a waste of our time to do. If people have managed almost the entire life cycle of it and it hasn't been the end of the world for them, then if they're having a problem now, they can just upgrade to 1.6, which we'll have to do in 2 weeks anyway.
Yeah, that's fair enough. In this case, I would say let's put a big banner that says, here's like point to the fact that this specific release has this specific regression, and please move to another version. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, that sounds sane. Although, again, I think James would tell us to backport it. But again, if a user is going to upgrade to 1.5.3 or whatever the new version would be, then why wouldn't they just upgrade to 1.6? Okay, that sounds good. And conscious of the number of points we have, are we happy to say that's a decision that we've reached?
Do we know for sure that for anyone who did create the Ingress class API resources, when we move back to annotation, is that going to work still for them, assuming that I made that change to like get cert-manager working?
I guess that's one of the things that we have to test. I don't know. My assumption, which was probably bad, was that because Ingress class is a first class object now, that when you install an Ingress controller, it should provide an Ingress class, rather than the user saying, oh, I've installed my Istio, so now I need to write an Ingress class that says Istio is a valid Ingress controller. But clearly that was a bad assumption. And also the spec is irritating because no Ingress class, the spec says, is invalid and should be ignored, but it's allowed for legacy reasons.
Yeah, it's really weird.
Okay, thanks for everyone's input. I guess we'll have to shoehorn some manual testing into the 1.7 release cycle. And move on to the next point, which is Serverside Apply. Secret Serverside Apply is currently behind a feature gate. And I guess, Josh, you can talk about this.
Yeah, this was the bit that I mentioned this morning. So yes, this is the Serverside Apply stuff for the kind of secret manager in the certificates controller. So I originally written the code under the assumption that it would be behind a feature gate. understanding that there would be a Kubernetes version that cert-manager supports that wouldn't support this feature. But when I did the end-to-end tests, it seems like the server-side apply stuff works for all supported Kubernetes versions. And so the question now is, do we want to put this behind a Featuregate at all? Since it should work with every supported version. I'm trying to think of kind of pros and cons of both. The pro is that it works, so there's no need to add it, and we can kind of just move on and merge it as is, and it's just in theory just like a net positive. The downside is that it touches something fairly sensitive, and putting it behind a feature gate would reduce the scope of how much damage it can do, if indeed we weren't very confident about it. I think that's like the pros and cons. So yeah, I don't know what people's thoughts on that are. I'm very happy either way, to be honest. Pragmatically, probably makes sense to not put it behind a feature gate, just to kind of, we can move on with our lives and not have to deal with this again next release kind of thing. Yeah.
I think feature gates are for stuff that changes behavior that users see in a way that they didn't expect.
Mm-hmm.
And all the secret thing is making it better, but transparently. So my vote is just merge it, as long as it passes all of our end-to-end tests, which it does.
Yeah, following on from what you said, like today it doesn't work as you would expect, but this makes it does work as you would expect. So yeah, that makes sense. Cool.
I was going to ask the same thing, whether or not that behavior is intuitive. Then it sounds like that's the way to go to remove the feature gates.
Yeah, I agree.
And this morning we talked about whether it may or may not attempt to change the secret type or pre-provisioned secrets. What did you find out?
Yeah, so I did this on Slack. I think I got myself into a bit of a loop on this, or yeah, I was thinking about it wrong, and I spoke to you about this yesterday as well, Jake. So cert-manager has this behavior that I didn't realize existed, that if you pre-create a secret has a field in it called type, and it kind of gives a kind of human readable or something you can program against kind of hint at what the secret is. And some of these are strongly validated, some of them are less strongly validated, some of them aren't validated at all. So they're just kind of human readable stuff. And one of those is TLS, which is the one we kind of prefer because that just makes the most sense. However, this type field is immutable, so you can't change it after the secret's been created. And so in the event that a user pre-creates a secret, cert-manager doesn't change it. So that's what I just quickly tested today. Was I created a secret which was opaque. I created a certificate which referenced that secret, and the type didn't change. It maintained its opaqueness. Yes. Which it is what it is. And just because I changed that area of the code, I was no longer copying the type anymore, just the way the kind of apply bit of the code worked. So some of the end-to-end tests were failing because it had this immutable error. I was trying to apply and change the kind of type field, which is no good. So yeah, I fixed that now. So it continues that behavior. What was brought up is that we don't actually have, as far as I can see, any end-to-end tests testing that kind of behavior. We have some unit tests, or at least my PR also adds some unit tests for that kind of behavior. But we don't have any end-to-end tests specifically targeting that. We have some side effect tests, which namely the ones that failed, because they are testing the CA injector. So that's pre-warming some secrets and doing some other stuff, which involves certificates. So that's how that was caught. But we don't have any tests targeting that particular behavior. Perhaps that's worth adding. I guess it's not very many lines of code, and it's just another test to add, I guess. So yeah, you might want to think about adding a test for that particular behavior. But yeah, that was the story of that.
Great, thanks. And I think those tests could come in later PRs. They shouldn't block.
Yeah, I agree. Cool. Great. I think we're all in agreement. Then I will. I need to work on the PR just because it needs rejigging just to actually not work as if it's working on a Featuregate, which is fine. Also need to follow up with a website PR. Now we know where we're at, and the website PR will be a bit cleaner now as well, because it'll just be like, this is what happens. Cool. The last thing that's worth checking is upgrade paths. I keep thinking about it and thinking about it. I can't see a way where this would break anyone, but I'll double check to see what happens. Yeah, the only bad thing that can happen is, yeah, I need to test it. In theory, one pre-warms a secret with a data key that's like, so if someone creates a secret that has like foo to bar or something in it, and that is owned by Alice. In today's controller, it adds a secret, or adds like a certificate and a private key or whatever to that secret, but it does an update operation. And in theory, what will happen is that every field in that secret will be owned by cert-manager. Then they upgrade cert-manager to now have the apply. And because cert-manager doesn't care about the foo bar, when it doesn't apply, it omits that foo bar. So there's an edge case where someone pre-warms foo bar into a secret, upgrades cert-manager, and then foo bar gets deleted. So I need to test that behavior to make sure that doesn't happen. And I need to double check what happens with the field owners and stuff like that, whether it's co-owned or what happens there. What was the last thing? The last thing was that I think I brought out before when I was working on this, was our user agent. So I don't think this PR isn't concerned with it, but it's something that maybe we should think about doing, as some further work, is that cert-manager's user agent, like Kubernetes user agent, is controller, just the word controller, which is obviously awful. So we should think about changing that, but there is some consideration to migration path there as well, for similar reasons. But I think that's a different conversation, something we can work on later on. Yes, yeah, thank you for linking the PR. Yes. Cool. I think that's everything for me.
Great, thanks. So yeah, we should merge it, but only once we're very happy that it doesn't destroy data in this one edge case that you thought of. Okay. The next point is a really old issue. It was kind of contentious, it looks like, because we went back and forth for a while, which is, should we allow users to override the self-check? Because so the Acme RFC states that you shouldn't instruct the CA to try and solve your challenges until you think that they will pass. And cert-manager is very strict about this. Like if you are solving an Ingress, if you have an Ingress HTTP1 solver, cert-manager will resolve the domain, and then open a HTTP request to the target IP and make sure that the well-known Acme challenge / token is the correct value. But most other tools that implement Acme don't actually bother with any of this. They just provision the token at a path that the user says, and then just tell the CA to go for it. And this, so if your Kubernetes cluster is completely free to access the internet and there's no weird NAT in the way, then cert-manager self-check is kind of the best way of doing it. But people keep posting that they have weird or corporate or lockdown setups, which means that cert-manager either it can't resolve resolve external addresses, or it's not allowed to connect to external IPs, or any number of reasons that means that it can't validate the full challenge the same way that an Acme server would do. So yeah, people just want to be able to skip the self-check. And I think the reason cert-manager has always said no to this is because I think at one point in the past we DDoS Let's Encrypt, and now we're very careful about making extra API calls, basically. But if it's not default behavior, I'm proposing that we just add kind of a weak flag. So that means that instead of doing the full resolve the address, make an HTTP call to the IP that it resolves to, and then check it's there, like just do an internal check, which would at least mean that your Kubernetes networking is working internally. Or if you're using a DNS challenge, then use the DNS API that you were given to check that the record is there, rather than just trying to resolve it. But because this will be opt-in, hopefully most people won't do it, and we wouldn't increase the number of API calls we make to Let's Encrypt too much.
I have this fear that a blog post will get written, and someone in that blog post will say, "This flag helped me do things quicker," and then that gets copy and pasted everywhere, and then everyone starts doing it, and then fire.
So I looked at the existing proposal, and because someone did actually write some code, and the proposal was to, instead of just having a skip check field, it would have a whole bunch of fields that let you configure the backoff and failure behavior, which is much more complicated, but still has the same result, still has the same thing where you could set in that field, just don't check, and I don't care that it, which I didn't really like, because it was a whole load more API for, I think most people would just turn it off if we exposed any functionality that would let you turn it off.
But kind of partially right. I started looking at implementing backup for certificate requests. So if we were to add that would kind of first before doing this, then that would limit the chance that someone would really DDoS Let's Encrypt in case if they set skip to, if they set skip to true, but at the same time it fails every time because it just takes so long to set up the solver. So that would at least limit the chance that they keep retrying every hour and it just fails, because I wonder if there's any way how to, I wonder what happens in between. How can we check that we don't accept the Acme challenge before even, I don't know, the Ingress has been created or set up? Is there?
So the interface on the solver there's something called present, which either creates the Ingress or gateway or DNS record. And if anything goes wrong with that, then we don't even try to do anything. We just say we couldn't configure the Ingress or couldn't create the DNS record. Then after that, there's something called check in the interface. So that is the self-check. And right now that's the full resolve, do the challenge, and then see if it would be valid. And then only after that, it tells Let's Encrypt to solve the challenge, or tells the Acme server. So if there's an error creating the DNS record at all, just having a weak skip of the check would not, we wouldn't request a certificate, or wouldn't request a challenge solve. Yeah, it's kind of an awkward one because I'm not asking for an answer in this 10-minute thread. I just think because I'm just trying to solve old issues, because it's a bad look for having 3-year-old issues. that have lots of upvotes, even though I don't actually personally agree with the feature.
It would be interesting how long it takes on average between the present succeeding and the self-check succeeding, and how does that compare with the timeout that Acme has?
Yeah, I think the Acme timeout is 3 seconds.
So if we almost every time take, if on average it tends to take longer between the present and the self-check succeeding, then it's because like once the Acme times out, I guess like then the order will be marked as failed, and then it's going to result in a new order again.
Maybe if you're doing exponential backoff stiff requests, do we have exponential backoff for orders? I didn't even look.
No, we don't.
Yeah. Maybe if we just have a utility package for exponential backoff and we just add that to everything, then we can implement this feature without feeling as bad.
Yeah, I feel like maybe like exponential backoff first would be good.
That seems like a very sane thing to do first.
We still have the risk that Josh mentioned, right? Is there a way to mitigate that somehow?
I mean, that's the exponential backoff, right? If people just, we will like increase the number of calls we make, but it won't start hammering Let's Encrypt for if someone just sets skip equals true.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd have to think about it for a while. I put it in like the context of like, what would Jetstack do as a user of cert-manager? Why would Jetstack not also just always use that flag? Because we like to think that we know what we're doing, and everyone likes to think that they know what they're doing. Like, what if you had a flag that said, "This makes it go faster if you know what you're doing"? It's like, sure, you know.
I'm thinking of a recent tech YouTuber who typed "Yes, do as I say" into the apt pack manager, which package manager, which it only asks you to type "Yes, do as I say" if you're about to do something that will break your system.
We should call him out in this video and see if we can drive viewership to our weekly meetings.
Not sponsored.
Sorry, go on.
I just said we're not sponsored.
Very much so, yeah. On the topic, I think where I'm coming at it from is the more I think about stuff like this, the more I'm just like, add it in. If people really want it, and even if we think they'll shoot themselves in the foot, add it in and add a silly name for the flag that lets them do it. Like, I know this is bad, but I want it anyway. Like a really ridiculous long name that makes it super clear that they're doing a bad thing. And I think the other thing that comes to mind is adding a root certificate to the chain. Like, it's dumb. Nobody should ever need it, but like, people cry and complain about it, so just add it and add a flag that makes them realize they're being dumb when they want to use it, kind of thing, and then everyone's happy. I think I don't want to derail into that
kind of thing.
Yeah, but like I've had success with that kind of approach before, like unsafe. Oh my god, don't do it. Like exactly like my orders typed. Like something like that. Like, are you sure you want to potentially DDoS Let's Encrypt? And then we're not really responsible for them making a dumb choice, but there could be a good use case for them to do it, or it enables it.
The core argument that made me, because I do not like the idea of this feature, but the core argument that made me go back and think actually it's like, well, every other client has this flag, so it just means that we won't use cert-manager. Which I think that is worse than us. Like, we can sit on our high horse, but Acme is just an open protocol. So if we want people to use cert-manager and have a good time, then I should add it.
Yeah, I do agree to some extent, but I do think there is a difference between the different clients. There is a distinct difference between a person running certbot 3 or 4 times locally on their machine and cert-manager recycling X number of certificates silently in the background.
Yeah,
for months.
And certbot is the HTTP server So it's like, yes, I am serving the challenge. Whereas if you have an Ingress controller and a service and a pod, it could actually just be broken because you could have run out of space and the pod will never get scheduled or something like that.
Yeah, literally anything, or you forgot to pay your Google bill, whatever. Like,
Okay. So action then, I think we should prioritize exponential backoff before we do anything to this. But we should have this feature and we should make it obvious you're not supposed to use it. Does that sound about right?
I was just going to say, there is already a flag, isn't there, that you can turn off the self-check globally.
Where? I wasn't aware of this.
I'm pretty sure there is. Am I dreaming that?
We do have lots of weird flags that are not actually that well documented. Maybe we should make that issue for Joachim. He's go through the controller by flags and find any that aren't documented.
I can definitely do that.
The other thing I was going to say was, yeah, I think I've asked, we've discussed this in previous years, and I think I've asked the same question before, but does the Let's Encrypt API have response headers that say, don't retry for another X number of seconds? So rather than just doing exponential backoff, you can do very specific backoff according to their instructions. Is that possible or not?
Let's have a look.
It's possible in some cases. I think it's possible with the rate limiting. Like the problem that I was thinking about was that exponential backup for certificate requests would be useful anyway, and it would be it could potentially be quite hard to orchestrate the two because they happen at different levels. And would potentially make it complex and like hard to debug if there was backup for certificate requests, and also you would look at things like orders that may or may not have failed.
Okay, so there is rate limited and retry after. But I think the problem is that once people have hit these headers in the wild, they're effectively banned from Let's Encrypt for a week. The retry after is like actually a week. So it doesn't really matter that the protocol has a retry after header because it's too late by the time you receive it. That's from memory though. Because the spec just says servers will send this if you're rate limited, and they should give you a retry after header. But I think it's one link. I think it's 1 week.
If it should, then I guess it's possible that not all Acme servers actually give that as well.
Cool. But yeah, I would be much happier even looking at this feature if we knew that all of our API calls had exponential backoff on.
Have we written down our hesitancy or the reason for the hesitancy for this PR in that issue? Maybe we should just add that as a comment in the open issue.
Let's put some stuff in the meeting notes. So we will exponential backoff. Yeah, we'll make sure all of our API calls have exponential backoff. Then we will implement this feature under a flag or with something that makes it obvious you shouldn't use it. What did I say? I think I said something else, but we'll add the...
There was an action to update the issue as well. To tell people this.
Yeah, and the reason that we will add it is that pragmatically other Acme clients have this feature, and we don't want to just drive people away in frustration. Cool. So yes, thanks for your patience, Nishant, but your point is up next.
Hey, yeah, thank you for meeting me. Yeah, so we discussed this in an earlier meeting, like in November end, I guess. Like, we wanted a separate, I mean, a page where we can tell the users what AWS privacy issue is, and then we can give some of the links of the blogs which we have, and also then we can link our AWS documentations from that page. So we would like to have the page under like the configuration external. I mean, there is a mention of AWS privacy issue right now there. So we just need a page after that, like external slash AWS privacy issue. So yeah, I sent an email to you, but I mean, for 2-3 people, I guess. So I did not receive any email back. So if there is any team email where I can send for future communication, it would be helpful to like have a healthy conversation or something like that. Yeah. So that is the two things I want to discuss. And one more thing is like we released a version 1.1 on December 21st. So that is one thing I just want to inform here. Yeah.
I think there is a public email, cert-manager maintainers, but there is also a. Okay, let me find the emails.
Yeah, I found the email in my inbox. Sorry about that. I think that's mostly on me. Yeah, December the 16th is a tricky period. That's like company-wide meetings and run up to Christmas, stuff like that. So, yeah, sorry for not replying.
Yeah, no
for that. The best place for that kind of stuff, emails normally fine. I think that was particularly a weird period, but I guess GitHub is always the best place for this kind of thing. But yeah, email is fine, and preferably the kind of open email. I think that the Google group. But on the website changes itself, I'm like +1 on that. I think that would be a good addition. Like the reason why that can't have another page. More documentation, the better, I'd say.
Sure.
I second that.
Yeah, sounds great. So I posted in the chat the 3 emails. The best one is the top one, but that will be completely public. So if you think about it, when you if you have something that's like NDA'd from your discussions with JetStack, then use the second one.
Okay.
And the third one is the kind of CNCF sandbox maintainer email that we are technically all supposed to get, but it doesn't seem to always work. So yeah, use the first one unless you have NDA reason.
Yeah, sure. That sounds good to me. Yeah, so once when the documentation is ready from our side, I'll raise a PR to the to your GitHub page, and then we can go from there, I guess. Yeah, that sounds good.
We should review it, but you can shout in the Slack channel, which we'll definitely look at, whereas my GitHub notifications are always a massive C.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Awesome. So yeah, that's everything.
I think when I talked about the self-check, disabling the self-check, I must have been referring to this PR, which I remember reviewing years ago. It wasn't a global disable flag. It was something along the lines of what's been requested, I think. But it never got merged. So, and this guy, Anton, wrote a whole like enhancement proposal for it, I think.
Yeah, I did review this as part of looking through the issue. Just because I didn't review it at the time because I didn't know it existed. I don't think there's any point adding all of these failure policies and back off stuff to the issuer. If anywhere, we should add the rate limiting at the kind of controller level where it's because the controller is hitting the Acme servers.
Yeah, I could have sworn there was a flag. Perhaps there used to be, and it's been removed, but perhaps it's all in my head. James Munley would remember. Anyway, that's all.
Excellent. So we actually finished a tiny bit early. So does anyone have anything else they are thinking about that they want to talk about?
I just, I'll say in the call as well, I just removed the CNCF email from the doc where it had been written down there. I just don't think I don't know if that's useful to encourage people to use. Like the others are probably better. Like the CNCF one is much harder to change, and the others should work as a point of contact.
Yeah, that makes sense. I just searched my incoming emails for cert-manager and wrote down
it's
everything that did reach me.
It's certainly a email address for us. One thing that I did think, we were talking about feature gating. I would like to have it written down somewhere, the reasons why we would use a feature gate. You described one use, Jake, where it's like a change that people might find surprising. We have a different use case with the additional key formats PR, which is that one, where we're doing it to be super duper mega conservative about our API, and we're not like no one will find it surprising because no one will know fields are there unless they want to use them anyway. Like there's no risk of being surprising there. So it would be nice to have that documented, but that's not like a thing we need to do urgently or anything.
Yeah, I mean that when the gateway API support, because we're supporting because it's an alpha API that has no stability guarantees, that's behind a feature gate because that makes sense as well.
Yeah,
I don't want people to start using it thinking that, oh, this will always work.
Yeah, I agree. Like it's when I think about it, it's not even super clear to me either. Like I thought I was confident about what a feature gate was, and now you bring it up. Like I agree. It's not really clear to me. Like why the PR? You just think why have I suggested it should be behind the feature gate? I don't know if I've suggested it or not, or implied it, or like agreed to it. Like why did I do that? Like does it make even sense because it's part of the V1N API? But why would the functionality or the logic be enabled in feature gate?
I think there's actually probably a really interesting thing there, and I'm maybe we're having the same train of thought where like it's not the right place to use a feature gate. Maybe I don't know if maybe there should be a V1 beta 1 again or V1 beta 2 to progress into it, but I think that's a whole barrel of fish that could be shot at and maybe doesn't need to be.
Oh god, yeah, I'd love a V2, but
Should we have a V2 alpha API that is behind a feature gate and we change all the time?
Maybe.
We
I
don't
see
even
the value to it.
We don't even have to do much documentation because, well, maybe we should have a different discussion.
Yeah, that kind of sounds like we're just going to build a bunch of really crazy stuff that's really interesting and then just like leave V1 behind. Yeah. But I think like it definitely makes sense. Like the server-side apply stuff, for example, like that's made sense to be behind a feature gate because it wouldn't work. Like it just would break the installation if you used it on the wrong version. But like that doesn't make sense. Like the fact that it's got feature in the name, I think maybe is like broken my brain a bit. Like this is a feature, it learns behind a feature gate kind of thing, like the word association.
Feature gate is only because it was called that. It's called that in Kubernetes. Like a lot of our naming convention is just straight from Kubernetes CLI tools.
One thing that I'm thinking is like, who is the Featuregate for? Because like in the PR I linked, the Featuregate is kind of for us to make it easy to change the API in the future. There's no user benefit to it. And with a Featuregate on the server-side apply stuff, it would be for us to be able to toggle it on and off, I guess, when testing, like, and ensure that behavior is the same. Or
so that was specifically for. So let's say it didn't work with 118, but it's a supported version. Users on 118 would still be able to use cert-manager, I guess would be the point there. Whereas users on 119 would be able to turn it on because they're on 19 and they want to make use of the feature, I guess.
Yeah, that makes sense. That it's kind of for both in that. Oh, I suppose it's more for the users in that case, whereas with the additional key formats, it isn't really a user feature.
A really good point. I'll put it in for the doc. If we want to support wider versions of Kubernetes, wider version spreads of Kubernetes, then we officially want to support. That's a Featuregate, right?
Mm-hmm. That also reminds me of the certificate signing request, which is still behind a Featuregate. We should look at that as well. Maybe like removing that gate and graduating it.
That should be in our design doc that is yet unwritten for Featuregates. How do you get code out of a Featuregate?
In theory, like the design document for the original feature would have a graduation block on it. I think I remember having this conversation as well at some point, that the original design for the certificate signing request is not necessarily any more valid anymore, or it's like doesn't have consensus. I think it was like drafted around the idea that we were going to migrate from certificate request to certificate signing request, which I don't think is necessarily true anymore. So the graduation criteria has changed, but it's like not been documented. Or yeah, maybe something for Slack.
Would there be any way to discover if anyone's actually using those certificate signing requests? Like, it'd be interesting to know if people actually use them.
I think the best way is to search GitHub for certificate signing request kinds of YAMLs. Because this is how I found, like, CockroachDB uses them for intra-cluster TLS. Or I think they should use cert-manager certificates, but I guess they don't want to depend on cert-manager.
I guess that awkward 10-second silence there maybe means we've come to the natural end of the meeting.
All right, I'll stop the recording and thanks for everyone's input.